Yeah, you can start this one. You guys are good? Okay, great. So, this is something I did over the summer, and I made a write-up for it because I thought it was cool. Ease of cracking custom launchers. So what is a launcher? Launcher is one of these things. I'm sure you've all used this one before. So you shouldn't make your own launcher, ever, because there are plenty that already exist that are easy to publish for, like Steam and Twitch and now Discord. It's a bunch of extra work that you have to do on top of what you already have to do. There is a bunch of networking stuff that you have to take care of. Go ahead. Yeah, thanks. There's a bunch of networking stuff you have to take care of with like sending and receiving the data and stuff like that. There's authentication, which can be an encryption, which is just more stuff. And then there's also like server cost and maintenance and just paying for all of it. And they're fairly exploitable unless you seriously know what you're doing. And of course, there's the unless you don't have access to existing launchers, which is like gray market software, which could be, for example, keygens obviously can't go on Steam, or like stuff that might be used to make illegal things can't be on like, you know, itch.io or something like that. Then the next point is if the software you're making already has like an authentication system, like Minecraft and Cube World already had authentication systems in place before the games came out, or like before they were really like popular, and so you may as well use it if you have it already. And then the last one is if you already have the extra budget and staff to sacrifice working only on a launcher like Blizzard does. Blizzard is a giant company. You probably will not own Blizzard soon, so you don't qualify for that. The disclaimer about this write-up is that it is for software that is still currently being sold and will not be fixed. So I'm going to change names of things and change some of the code shown to protect the developer of this software. So the first thing is I gotta find the vulnerability I'm going to exploit. So I'm gonna look at first, how do I actually obtain the software? So the software is distributed through Patreon, and so Patreon supporters are sent a key every month. The launcher asks, give me the key file that you own. If the key is up to date, the launcher downloads the latest version of the software. If the key is invalid, like you don't have one, or it's just old from like a year ago or something, then the launcher refuses to download the latest version of the software. But if you have it downloaded already, you can still open the copy you already have. So how the launcher works, as we know for fact, is it looks like this. That's the launcher, and it takes input and gives you the software. That's not useful. So I'm going to change this black box into one black box and another black box. That is the server. And the two communicate back and forth like that. And that's still not very useful. So, got blue. Blue stuff is the launcher, and green stuff is the server, just so that we have context for what's going on. We still have the request and then receiving the software at the end. And so you have a request, so the launcher loads up the key. This is how I think the launcher should work. This is like, obviously I don't know the code for the actual programming of the launcher, but I can assume, and so that's what I'm doing here. So the launcher, I would make it load the key, sends the key to the server, and then after that, the server checks if the key is valid. If the key is invalid, the server is like, this is wrong. And then the launcher states that the key was wrong. If it is valid, then the server is going to send the software, and then the launcher is going to save the software, and then have the software. this is pretty secure, like as it is, but there are still some vulnerabilities with it. You can go ahead. So like the potential vulnerabilities are the key could be reverse engineered. If you can like figure out the process for making the key, you can just make your own key. And that would be making a key gen. It requires cryptography knowledge, which is a downside. And then the fix could be you could just change how the key is generated. If you just change the cryptography being used, now they have to make a new key gen. Next vulnerability would be if the launcher, the launcher already runs the program if it's already installed. There's no DRM on it, even if you don't have the key. And so the exploit is obviously piracy. If I have the thing and I give it to you, you can run the thing. Like you don't need the key that way. The downside to piracy is that it requires someone have the thing in the first place. You can't just like make it from nowhere. And then the fix could just be requiring a matching key to run the software even if it's already installed. So before I start writing a keygen, I want to get some more information. Like, if I were to write a keygen, how is the key being made? Like, I got to kind of figure that out. So, first thing I did was download a clean copy of the launcher just to mess with it. I ended up making like 7 or 8 copies of the same folder just to like test different things. And so the first thing I did is run that command, netstat avn, which just shows all of the open network traffic and the IP that you're connected to, if it's available. And so I found out that the launcher was connecting to this IP via TCP. And the port it was connecting on kind of changed around a little bit as it made new requests and as I like closed it and opened it over and over. But it was always above 57,000. And so knowing that, I could use a program called Wireshark, which lets you view packets and communication like that, and just looked for TCP packets above port 57,000. And that gave me some interesting information on the next slide. So the packets that I received, that I saw going out and coming back were all like just HTTP packets that were not encrypted or anything. And so like the first one was logstatus.txt, which was just a 1. And then there was patch notes, which was just like, here's all the changes that I've made over time. And then there was pat build version ID, pub build version ID, and free and XP build version ID. And those are all just different version numbers, like 2.50, 2.51, 2.52. And then there was this weird thing called source_key.key, which was a big hex file with a bunch of hashes and text headers. And if I remember, the text header said something like pub build key, and then like a big string. And I was like, there's no way that that's just like the keys, right? Like you're not downloading the keys and then checking if that matches the key that you have, right? Now I'm starting to think, okay, maybe I had it wrong. So let's remake our model. So we got the request, launcher requests a key, server sends all of the keys, launcher checks if the key is real, and then the launcher deals with if it's valid or not. And if it is valid, the server just gives you the software and trusts that you said, yeah, this was right. There's a new problem here. You can go ahead next. The new problem, the new vulnerability, click really quick. Thanks. New vulnerabilities, the launcher can be modified to just always say that it has the right key. And so the exploit is you can create a DLL that overrides the key validation function. So like if there was a function being called that was like is key valid, you could just make one that says return true all the time, and it will just always say yes, it's valid. And then the only fix would be you'd have to rewrite the entire launcher and the entire server and the communication between them to make sure that that can't happen. I wasn't done. I was going to look a little more, because that still seemed like a lot of work. Go next. So I would then opened up GDB, which lets you take a program and basically step through it, even if it's like compiled and there's no information regarding the code. You can still mess with it and see what the memory looks like and where in the program it is. Next. So there are pros. It's great for reverse engineering any software, like literally anything that exists, you can use GDB on it. Cons is that almost all software is obfuscated, which means you would basically just be reading assembly, and that's not great to look at, especially because it's super long. So I can also use strace, which is something that shows system calls like opening a file. And so I wanted to look for when is the key file being opened, and then I could kind of discern like, okay, here's when it's being opened. Obviously, it's being checked if it's real after that point. But something weird happened when I tried to do that, and that's that it never actually opened that file, or at least I couldn't find when it did. But on the next slide, I did see more packets going through, including filelist.txt, and then software.exe, and DLL, and like all of these other files. And I noticed that the filelist.txt was just a list of all of the files in the software on the server, and that you could just view it in a web browser. And so, if you go to the next slide, there's a new vulnerability, which is I can just I can make a new launcher, which just asks for all of the files, and just the server will give it to you. The exploit is creating a new launcher, and the only fix is you have to rewrite everything from scratch. That's the kind of fix you want when you're making an exploit, because it's like really hard to actually fix the problem. And so that's the one I'm going with, because it's like pretty easy to do, just because I'm asking for files and just downloading them. So then I gotta write the exploit. So I have a few options for programming languages. I could use C. The problems with C is networking is hard, and everything has to be done manually, and there's like memory management and stuff, and I don't want to have to deal with that because it's scary. And I could use C++, which is just C with classes, so that's still kind of scary. I could use Python, which makes things easier, but networking is still hard. So I decided to go with Bash, because instead of writing my own program, I could just use other people's programs and then say I did the work. So what I have to do is I have to download filelist.txt. I gotta read through it and like just get all of the lines. I have to download all of the files in that list. I used curl. I probably should have used wget because curl isn't that great apparently, but I didn't care at this point. So this is like I said, I changed the server name, but this is the actual code that I used, and I wanted to be nice to myself, so I even left comments in there. So first I listed the server, and then all the folders for the different builds. Funnily enough, pub build isn't actually public. Like free build is public. Pub build is for standard patrons, and then you've got the different tiers. So ver is the version that you want to download. So I wanted to download the early patron builds for like beta stuff, and then file list location on the server, which is just filelist.txt. So then how it actually works is it says, being nice to you, the exploit that like communicates. It says getting file list from this path, and then just downloads the file list to filelist.txt. That's setting up nice counter stuff. I didn't have to do that. That just sets the current line to 0, total lines the number of total lines, and then says this is how many files there are going to be. Just so I could have like a progress bar. So then I have while readl that takes the file list. That's just reading through each of the lines. The first line was just like a hash for, I assume, making sure that the text file was correct or something. I didn't care, so I just had to like load it in and then throw it away. So I just, for the heck of it, I just printed out, here's the hash. And then if it's anything after the first line, I just set F to the result of this, which basically just gets each line was like the list of it was like the file that you had to download, and then it was like a hash for that file, so I had to just cut off the second half of that. And then it says it's downloading the file and a total file name, and then it downloads the file, and when it's done, it says it's done with the file. And then it adds 1 to the total number of lines. And then I wait, because at one point I wanted to multi-thread it because I was like, how could I hate myself a little bit more? That didn't happen, but I still left the wait in there just because. And then I just downloaded all files, and that little bit just says press any key to quit, and you push enter and it closes. So, last thing I had to do, after I made the exploit and like found the vulnerability, I wanted to report it to the actual developer because I am not a bad person, and I wasn't just gonna like distribute this code online for anyone to steal. So the report contents, you want to state that you're not malicious, because the worst thing you can receive is an email that says, hey, I just stole all your stuff. So then you want to say, after you've said that you're not actually stealing, you want to say, hey, I just stole all your stuff, here's how. So you want to explain the vulnerability, provide proof of concept, which is that exploit I made, and then suggest how you might fix the vulnerability. So the suggested fixes were implement authentication, like actually check if the key is real, and then do that on the server rather than on the client, because if it's on the client, like I said before, I can just say that I'm right, and then they'll believe me. And so then the response that I got back basically said, thanks, I'm not going to fix this because it's way too much work, and I would rather like make the software better than ask for people's money and then spend time not really doing anything while they're still paying me. And then also, hey, you can use that as much as you want. Like, I don't care. If people really want to steal, they can, but like you were nice about it, so I'm fine with it. And then they also gave me a bunch of keys for like the highest tier stuff to thank for telling them about it. So, to recap, don't make your own launchers, please. Like, this could all have been avoided if they just like used Patreon's ability to have people be logged in to download stuff instead of hosting it themselves and like trying to set that up. Finding vulnerabilities is usually way harder than like actually making the program. I probably spent like 3 hours trying to figure out where the problem was, and then 20 minutes actually writing the bash code. And so like, I imagine how I would like make the system, and that's how I was able to find the vulnerability. You want to use the tools at your disposal, like NetSet, Wireshark, GDB, strace, just because if you have the tools, you may as well use it instead of like trying to figure it out in the blind or in the dark, or making them yourself. Like, that sounds awful. And then obviously you want to report the vulnerabilities that you find and like how to fix them to the developer rather than just distributing them online, because that's illegal. And also disadvantages people who just want to make money in cool software. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.